Good evening all and welcome to some haunted house scary stories. So buckle up because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This story is from my mum, but it has always freaked me out, and it freaks her out to tell it. She so rarely mentions it to me. But let me just jump right in. My mum moved around a lot as a kid, since my grandpa worked for the government for over 40 years, so they would place him in different offices throughout the state. When my mum and uncle were in elementary school, they moved far up north in my state near the Ozarks. My mum hated the town they moved to and the house. Once they had moved there, it felt like their lives were somehow cursed. My grandparents, who never had marital trouble, considered divorcing. My uncle, who was one of the smarter kids in his class, was all of a sudden doing very poorly in school, and my mum was being relentlessly bullied. For context, my mum grew up Baptist, so they always had religious iconography in the house. There was a night in the house that freaked my mum and grandma out so badly, they have the same story about what happened. My grandpa and uncle never really believed them for what they saw, but they did admit the house was peculiar. So there was a night that my mum could not fall asleep, no matter how hard she tried. She kept feeling uneasy and sick, so she assumed she was coming down with a cold. To aid her sleep, she got up from her bedroom to grab a glass of water in the kitchen. My grandma also happened to be awake at the same time for the same reason. As they walked back from the kitchen, they heard a dragging sound in the living room. My grandma panicked at first, thinking someone had broken into the house, but as they got closer to the living room, they noticed no sign of entry. The front door and windows were all locked, and they kept looking around the living room for the source of the dragging sound and noticed the Mary statue they had on their piano was scooting subtly in a straight line. There was no AC unit or draft to cause this movement. My grandma and mum freaked out and didn't know what to do, and they immediately ran into their bedroom, where they saw the statue almost fly across the piano and fall on the ground from how fast it was seemingly pushed off. My grandma went to a medium in her town after this happened. As for her, this was the last straw with this house. My grandma was not a very superstitious woman and only told me her side of the story before she passed. But after this event happened, she wanted to know why a statue of Mary, the Mother of God, had nearly flown off their piano. My grandma began to connect the dots when the medium asked where they lived, because when she gave their street address, the medium explained that parts of the town were built on the Trail of Tears. My grandma thought it made sense because my uncle kept finding arrowheads and old stones that looked similar to beads in their backyard and all around the neighborhood. My grandma got rid of the statue to prevent anything else weird from happening. They moved out of that mountain town a few months later, and once they moved, their lives went back to normal, as if everything had been a bad illusion. I lived in this huge old house from around the ages of 9 to 13, and for most of that time, it was just me and my dad. A lot of strange things happened there, but one of the worst happened when I was around 10. I was always too scared to sleep upstairs because the whole third floor had always freaked me out. It was loud up there, and something about the house didn't sit right with me. One night, though my dad finally made me sleep in my room on the third story, I was terrified, so I decided to read a book until I got tired enough to pass out. He was sitting there with my lamp on reading, when out of the corner of my eye, I saw a huge tarantula crawling up the bedsheet. I freaked out and threw the blankets off me, and after shaking them around, nothing would be found, so I convinced myself I had imagined it. I got back into bed and started reading again. I was getting sleepy, and noticed some movement out of the corner of my eye. I looked up from my book and saw a young girl in a white nightdress standing in my doorway watching me. I froze. I didn't know what to do, and I think I just hid behind my book because I was too scared to even move. When I looked again, she was gone. After that, it was about a year before I slept in that room upstairs again. But once I did, I started noticing more things. There was a balcony with a locked door, and it had an old latch that you had to twist to slide shut. It was rusty and very hard to operate. My dad could barely get it open sometimes. But all the same, I lost count of how many times I went upstairs and found the door somehow standing wide open, with no one having been home all day to open it. Other times I would go to bed with it locked, only to wake up to it slamming open. The worst thing, though, happened one summer when my dad decided to sell the house. The housing market was bad, so no one wanted to buy it, and we kept having open houses. We would usually go across the road to our neighbor's house and wait while the realtor showed people around. One day, we were sitting there watching the house when we saw a young woman suddenly run out, sit down, bury her head in her hands. Her husband came out after her and talked to the realtor for a bit. Then the two of them got into their car and left. Obviously, once everyone was gone, we asked the realtor what happened. Apparently, the couple had been upstairs and gone into the bathroom, where they saw a naked girl with wet hair staring at them in the mirror. That shook me badly, because suddenly, it was not just me who was seeing things anymore. We told some of the neighbors about it, and most of them just laughed it off. They thought it was funny. But one of the older neighbors, a man who had lived in the area for years, took it seriously and told us a story about the house. According to him, a man spent years building that house for his family, working on it every day until it was finally finished. The day after everyone moved in, he had a heart attack on the front lawn and died. After that, the family was devastated, especially his daughter, who later died by taking her own life in the upstairs bathroom. And after hearing that story, I stopped wondering whether I was just imagining things. My mum's side of the family has always had some kind of connection to the paranormal, and I feel like I inherited it. My mother says it all started back when she was in high school, when she and her sister and a friend of theirs and their cousin Tom played with a Ouija board. At first, whatever they contacted seemed to be almost polite. It answered questions that no one should have been able to know the answers to. And then it turned cruel, started cursing at them, and said awful things. Before they stopped, it told Tom that he was going to die the following Friday. They all tried to brush it off and convince themselves it was just a board game, but Tom was scared out of his mind all week. Sure enough, after the Friday football game, he was driving home and passed away in a car accident. After that, my mum never looked at anything paranormal the same way again. I've had my own experiences for as long as I can remember. My mum and I both seem to have the ability to see things, while my dad has always been the kind of person who avoids the paranormal at all costs. I know he has seen things too, but he doesn't like to discuss them. It scares him, so he pretends not to notice. When I was a toddler living with my grandparents, I used to see shadow people that I called ninjas. I also saw what I called the purple people. They would hide inside closets and corners of rooms, usually just standing there and staring at me. They never actually hurt me, but they absolutely terrified me. They seemed like they were the only ones there to scare me, and that was bad enough. A few years later, when I was around 7 or 8, I had one of the strangest experiences of my life. I had been having nightmares, so I crawled into bed with my parents in the upstairs bedroom. In the middle of the night, I woke up and realized something was wrong. The room looked completely different. The dimensions were the same, but everything inside had changed. The decor looked old and worn. It was like I was looking at the room in a way it might have looked 100 years ago. It gave me this horrible, eerie feeling. I kept blinking and opening and closing my eyes in an attempt to convince myself that I was, in fact, imagining this. But the room stayed that way for about 15 minutes. Then after I kept blinking and looking again and again, suddenly everything flipped back to normal. At my great-grandmother's house, I used to see a man in one particular room all the time. He always stood in the corner, was tall, slender, and dark-haired, and even though he looked human, his body was grey and see-through, like a translucent shadow of a person. He liked to scare me by making horrible jump-scare faces, in ways no human face should be able to do so. Of course, I told my family about him, and when I described what he looked like, they told me I had just described my great-great-grandfather, who had supposedly died in that exact corner. They said he had been a joker all his life and enjoyed scaring people, but that did not make it any less frightening as a kid. But it did make the whole thing even stranger. When I was 10, my parents and I moved into a new home, a 100-year-old 2-story house up on a big hill. A few months after we moved in, I was playing with a pair of night vision goggles I had convinced my mum to buy me from Walmart. To me, they were amazing. In reality, they were just basically neon green glasses with a green light shining out the front. But at 10 years old, that was enough to feel like high-tech gear. One night with all the lights off, I walked down the hallway towards my parents' room. My dad was napping in there, and from the doorway I could see the side of the bed and his body lying there horizontally. But the green light from the goggles was casting a shadow on the wall behind him, and what I saw was not my dad at all. It was the perfectly outlined dark shadow of a little girl with 2 pigtails standing upright on the wall behind him. I remember noticing it clearly, but I was not even scared in that moment. I just kept going and never had another memory of seeing that girl again. As I got older, the experiences in my family kept on getting stranger. When I was about 12, my younger brother, who was 4 at the time, my mum and I went down the street to my aunt's house to babysit my baby cousin while she ran errands one night. It was dark and we were in the back room of the house when my brother suddenly started acting weird. He clung to my mum and would not talk or look around. Then the phone rang. I answered it, said hello and got no reply. Right then, my brother looked towards the dark garage door and said, "Mum, what are they doing here?" The phone rang again. My mum answered it this time, but there was still no one on the line. Then my brother started sobbing and begging us to make the scary people leave. The phone would not stop ringing. It rang again. Every time we hung it up, it rang again. Eventually, we just unplugged it and moved it to the front room, where we sat by the door and read Bible stories until my aunt got back. My mum was having awful things happen too. Doors would open on their own, lights would switch on and off, footsteps would stomp around, and the doorbell would ring when no one was there. She also told me about a terrible dream she had about our cousin, who had just hung himself. In the dream, she saw him with his head down. When she approached him, he turned around, grabbed her, and screamed that he was going to end my life. His eyes were red and evil, and she said it felt completely real. Another time she made a cup of coffee and turned to grab the creamer. She heard a slam so loud it shook the entire house. And when she turned back, the coffee cup had been knocked off the floor, and the coffee had exploded everywhere, covering the walls, counters, and cabinets. After that, I started talking to her more openly about what I had experienced. She told me something even worse. The man who had lived in our house before us had decided to take his own life via bullet in the dining room. It was a great time to learn that. The most recent and terrifying thing happened when I was a junior in high school. I loved baseball, and right outside my upstairs bedroom, my mom had hung 3 pictures of my brother, my sister, and me, each playing the sport. Mine was from a coach pitch and showed me in the middle of a swing. Well, one night, I had my best friend and his girlfriend over, along with my girlfriend. We decided to watch a creepy new Rob Zombie movie called Witches of Salem. I thought it would be eerie, and I was right. The movie was full of cult stuff, possessions, and all kinds of strange visual effects. It almost felt like watching an acid trip, with all the swirling colors and distorted images. I remember thinking the whole thing looked like it was trying to hypnotize the people watching it. After the movie ended, it was time to take our girlfriends home. When I got back, my mum looked frantic. She told me that not long after I left, they heard a huge bang upstairs that shook the whole house, like the dresser had fallen over. My parents assumed it was me, but when they realized I was gone, they went upstairs to check. My picture had been shattered and was laying on the floor in front of my brother's room, at least 15 feet down the hall from where it had been hanging. The frame was mounted 4 or 5 feet off the ground, and the hallway was carpeted. There was no way that cheap little frame should have made that kind of noise they described, and there was no way it should have flown that far across the hallway. The glass was shattered, and when I looked at the photo itself, I felt my body go cold, because there was a jagged tear straight through my body, and across the photo were tiny holes, like someone had taken a safety pin and punctured it 1 millimeter at a time. It formed a perfectly straight line. No human could have done that to a picture. My mum purchased a new frame and rehung the same photo, but the next morning it was off the wall again, lying 15 feet down the hall in front of my brother's room. So, she put 2-sided tape on the back, nailed it up, and secured it once again. The next day it flew off the wall once more, this time landing in the upstairs bathroom on the other side of the toilet. It had gone around the corner and across the room in a way that made no sense at all. That was the final straw for my mum. She made a copy of the picture, burned the original, rehung the copy, and opened Bibles all around the house. After that, the picture never fell again. I am now 22 and just bought my first house this April. Things have been going great, but over the last few weeks I have started feeling uneasy again. I feel like I'm not alone, and I keep seeing things out of the corner of my eye. Small items keep going missing and then turning up in places I already searched. It is starting to feel like something is about to start up again, which is probably why I wanted to share this story. I used to live in a haunted house for over 15 years. I was the only one sensitive enough to recognize that it was haunted, but my son and then husband also saw things that they couldn't explain. It started when I heard knocking on the front door late at night. I would go downstairs to check, of course, and when I would look through the peephole, I'd see no one. Even opening the door, I'd been met with nothing but blank air. I also heard knocking on the door of our bedroom, and I would call out to my son thinking it was him. But upon further inspection, as before, no one would ever be there. We also had things happening, like the sudden appearance of a swarm of black flies, with no idea what drew them there. Same with about 7 to 8 large black spiders appearing together on the ceiling of the hallway for no obvious reason in the middle of the night. One of our cats behaved strangely by pawing in an odd manner at the walls on several occasions. There were sudden bad sulfur smells in the house too. We checked it all out and found nothing that could explain any of it away. Those were the things that all 3 of us experienced, but I also had experiences they did not. For example, I saw someone trying to get into our house through a door which we always kept locked. This was startling, and he disappeared when I got up to see what was going on. I saw the same entity when I was stepping out of the shower one day, and he literally vanished right in front of my eyes. Frequently I would hear someone coming into the bedroom in the morning, walk quickly around the bed to my side, kicking the foot of the bed as he did so. I thought it was my husband at first, only for me to realize he had already left for work. Several other things happened too, but I would love to hear someone else's experiences from living in a haunted house. How long did you live there? Did you have just one or two experiences, or were there several? And how has any of this changed your thoughts on the paranormal? I want to start off by saying that nothing huge or dramatic ever happened to me. These were all small, strange moments, but they stuck with me in a way I can't really define. Let me give you some background. I grew up in a somewhat rural area. I would not call it the middle of nowhere. It was about a 20-minute drive to the nearest town in either direction, and one of those towns was still pretty small. Our house itself was also a little unusual. It was an earth home, meaning most of it was built partially underground. We had one front door and only 4 windows, so the inside could feel pretty closed off. Even though we lived out there, I was surrounded by family. Directly across the street was my grandmother. To the left of her house was one of my great uncles, and next to him was another great uncle. On the other side of my house was my uncle, and next to him was my great-grandfather, who owned a dump trucking business that most of my family worked for. So there were always people nearby, even if I couldn't always see them. That said, I spent a lot of time alone. My younger siblings would often go with my grandparents in the trucks for work, so I would be left at the house pretty much alone very frequently. One thing I remember happening more than once was hearing my name being called when no one was around. I would be outside, usually in the backyard, and I would hear someone call out to me from a distance. Every time I would stop and look around, expecting to see a family member, but there was never anyone there. It wasn't even a voice I recognized. Behind our house were open fields and some wooded areas, and there were a lot of coyotes in the area. I would hear them sometimes, and they always sounded much closer than they actually were. Even so, I never saw one on our property or even nearby. I always told myself the voice was just my mind playing tricks on me, or maybe something echoing from far away. When I got older and became a teenager, I spent most of my time in my room. I did not get along with my stepfather and preferred to keep to myself. When his kids came over, I would sometimes stay up late talking with his oldest daughter. There was not much else to do anyway. Our house was basically a dead zone, and because it was underground, we could only get cell service or Wi-Fi near the front of the house. The problem was, my stepfather was very strict about us being out of our rooms at night. If he caught us, he would accuse us of sneaking food and start yelling. On top of that, he had shot out the only outdoor light we had, which was mounted on a pole near the house. I still don't know why he did that. Because of it, the entire place was almost completely dark at night, especially the back half of the house where there were no windows. One night, my stepsister and I decided to sneak out of our rooms and go near the front window for cell service. We thought my stepfather was already home. As we crawled behind the couch, I looked up and saw a silhouette of a person standing in the storage room doorway across the house. One of the only windows was behind that doorway, so the figure was backlit. I could not make out any details, just the shape of someone standing there. I immediately froze, and my stepsister saw it too. We both panicked and ran back to my room as fast as we could, shutting the door behind us. We jumped into my bed and pulled the blankets over ourselves like that would somehow help. I asked her if she saw it, and she said yes, but assumed it was her dad. Not even a few seconds later, I saw light come through under my bedroom door. I opened it slightly and saw that it was actually my stepfather just getting home from work. He worked for the Department of Transportation, so his hours were unpredictable. I turned back to her and said, "He just got home." She then tried to explain it by saying it must have been her sister sleepwalking. The problem with that was I had never seen or heard her do it before. Also, the figure we saw was taller than my mum, who is about 5'7", and my stepfather is shorter than her, and her sister is shorter still. Neither of us had a good explanation, and we ended up sleeping in the same bed that night. I should also mention that I enjoy scary things like horror movies, haunted houses, and that kind of adrenaline rush. But what I felt that night was completely different. It wasn't fun, nor was it exciting. My stomach dropped, and something about it just felt wrong. At some point, the house was renovated, and a hallway was added right next to my bedroom. Because of how it was built, there was only about an inch or two of space on either side of my doorway, which becomes important later. I also struggled with insomnia, so I spent a lot of nights lying awake in the dark. From my bed, I could see straight down the hallway leading to the open part of the house. There was just enough light to make out shapes if someone walked through. One night, I was lying there staring at the small red standby light on my television trying to fall asleep. I was focusing and unfocusing my eyes when I suddenly got the feeling that something was there. Out of the corner of my eye, it looked like someone was leaning around the doorway peeking into my room. Every time I tried to look directly at it, it would be gone. I would squint, grab my glasses and stare down the hallway, but there was nothing there. The problem is that there was physically not enough space for someone to stand there and peek around the corner. There was maybe an inch or two of clearance at most. This happened multiple times over different nights, but I always convinced myself it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, especially since I was not wearing my glasses. The last major thing that happened before I graduated and moved out took place during the summer. I was home alone, dog-sitting my best friend's dog along with my own. I was in the kitchen cooking, just going about a normal day when I noticed both dogs acting very strange. They were from the same litter, and usually inseparable, either playing together or lying next to each other, but this time my dog was sitting directly at my feet, completely upright and stiff. He was not lying down or relaxing, he was just planted there, staring. I nudged him a few times trying to get him to move, but he would not budge. My friend's dog was pacing back and forth, panting harder than I had ever seen. She looked like she was trying to find somewhere to hide, even glanced up at the counters like she wanted to jump on them. Naturally, she came over and sat at my feet too. Just like my dog, neither of them would lie down. The strangest part was where they were looking down. Both of them kept focusing on the front door area and the darkness beyond it. My dog stared at it constantly, while the other would glance towards it and then quickly look away, like she was afraid to keep looking. I was unsettled enough that I tried to send my friends a message, but it would not go through. I tried to rationalize it. I thought maybe a storm was coming and they could sense it, but they never acted like that again, not even once. Even now, years later, my dog doesn't react to storms at all. He will sleep right through thunder. Another thing worth mentioning is that I never liked that house, especially my sister's room, which was right next to the storage room where I saw the silhouette. She never had any issues and slept there without issue, but I always felt uncomfortable being in that space. After my parents divorced and I moved in with my dad, I never experienced anything like this again. One last odd detail about my dog is that he is absolutely terrified of balloons and decorative lanterns, the small hanging kind. Before I moved to my own place, he had never seen them, but now he reacts to them immediately and will growl and bark until they've been removed, and I cannot keep them in the house because of how strongly he reacts to them. Maybe there are perfectly normal explanations for all of this, or perhaps it was just my imagination. Every time something happened though, my heart would always race. And in that house, I know something wasn't right. I live in a relatively haunted house. I've lived here since my 3rd birthday, and I've been experiencing paranormal activity since I was about 7. The earliest I can remember is when I was laying on my bunk bed and I was trying to sleep. It was late, and I was really tired. I was laying on my side so I could hear this light creaking noise behind me, along with a quiet tap. So, as I was and still am a very paranoid person, I rolled over and can see my wardrobe door now open. I now sleep with a band on my wardrobe door so it won't open, and this freaked me out because I had never seen anything like that happen before. Another time on my bunk bed, I was sitting on it playing some game on my tablet and felt something scratch at the wood underneath me. I leaned over the edge and looked under it, but there was nothing there. But I had a weird feeling, not quite like I was being watched, but more like there was someone in the room. At some point in this room, it was really early in the morning, I didn't know what time, but I could feel it was the morning. I felt something literally lifting up the side of my mattress. I was frozen in fear and it was dead silent in the room. I just lay there, scared and trying to keep my breathing slow to make whatever it was think I was still asleep. Around 20-ish seconds later, I said in a sleepy voice, "Nina, it's not time to get up yet," Nina being my sister, and it immediately stopped. I didn't even hear my door shut. I bolted upright, and nothing was in the room with me. I also had this really creepy dream about this doll I had in this room at the time. I was on the floor near my door, and I looked back at my doll, who was on my toy box opposite the door, and her eyes were rolled back and she was staring directly at me. She fell onto the floor, and I screamed after I woke up. I looked at the floor and she had fallen over, onto the floor. I don't know if they're linked, but I thought I'd add it. In my second room, after my sister Elizabeth moved out and I took her room, the activity wasn't that bad, but it was still weird. At this point, I was probably around 10. In my house, the bedroom doors have little window panels above them. They're only about 10-ish centimeters tall, and I genuinely don't know why they're there, but whatever. One night, I was having a sleepover with my best friend at the time called Emily. We were laying on my bed with our feet on the wall. We were just gossiping and talking about school, and Emily said she saw something walk past the window. I was really confused, and I looked up at it. I didn't see anything, but I felt an uneasy feeling like I was being watched. We couldn't sleep very well that night. We just laid on my bed, too scared to step off it. In this room, which my family calls the green room because the walls are green, I always heard really loud tapping in the walls. It didn't sound like it was coming from another room, it sounded like it was in the walls. It was always above me or near me. This always happened at night, and the tapping sped up and stopped right after. I still don't know what this is, and I've recently started hearing it again. I also used to see the curtains move without windows open or a fan on. My house is set up quite weirdly. You go up the stairs, and the bathroom is in front of the stairs. My mum's room is next to the bathroom, then the green room, my sister's room, the one who still lived there, Nina, my first room, and a cupboard. If you walked out of the green room, you could sort of see down the stairs from a side point of view, but I'll get to that later. During the summer, while I was still in the green room, my door was open and I was on my computer. I don't remember what I was doing, but I stood up to get a drink. I looked down the stairs before I walked to them, and I saw some black figure speed down the stairs. It was really short and I only saw it for a second, but none of my family looked like that. I then, a few years later, moved into my current room which is called the Purple Room, and you can probably guess why that is. This was Nina's room. When I first moved into the Purple Room, stuff fell over onto their side, things that were neither heavy nor balancing. It happened a few times. A while ago I was having a sleepover with my cousin, and I got up to use the toilet late at night. I finished when I got this weird feeling. For some stupid reason I stopped walking and looked down the stairs. Bear in mind my family were all in bed, and I heard something like bare feet running on a smooth surface, my hallway downstairs for example. I ran back into my room and we grabbed weapons, went downstairs and searched everywhere. But there was nothing. Me and her went back upstairs, blocked my door, grabbed our weapons to protect ourselves if we had to, and nothing happened after that. More recently, I had a sleepover with my best friend Rin. We were about to go to sleep so the lights were off. I rolled over to say something to her, and I could have sworn she was staring at me. Her eyes were black and she was motionless, and she was just looking at me. So I asked her, "Rin, are you looking at me right now?" "No," she replied, but her mouth didn't move. I turned the light on, and she was facing the other way, wrapped in a blanket. Another time I was having a sleepover with Rin again. This was a few months ago, and I was sleeping on the floor and she was on my bed because she didn't want to sleep on the floor. I was about to fall asleep when we heard 2 footsteps coming towards my door, and then one big bang, like someone jumped right outside my door. Bear in mind it was 4 a.m. and my dog sleeps with my mum. I've also heard a dog or something running upstairs when my dogs were downstairs, things walking up and down the stairs when no one's there, and I've seen shadows from the corner of my eye. There is no doubt in my mind that my house is haunted, and recently I've been hearing scratching in the attic, even though we have rat repellent everywhere, and there's no possible way a human could be there. If I have any updates, I'll let you know. But for the meantime, just be aware, something spooky is afoot in my home. When I was around 10, I was living with my mum and sister in a very old rural farmhouse in Northern California in a town called Loomis. It was a simple 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house with a cellar, an attic, and lots of land around it for horses and fruit trees. One hot summer day, the 3 of us were home. I was at my computer playing RuneScape when I began to hear extremely loud, violent banging on the walls. It was so intense that it rattled the windows. At first, I ignored it because I was so absorbed in my game, but after a few minutes my curiosity turned into frustration and I had to figure out what was making that noise. My first thought was that it was my sister, who was 16 at the time and acting stupid and kicking the walls with both legs because that is how loud it sounded. But she was not doing it. In fact, she thought I was the one doing it. It confused both of us because the sound was even louder than what a person could have made by kicking the wall. It honestly sounded like a car was crashing into the house over and over again for hours. We got our mum and said she heard it too. None of us were causing it. We checked the roof and the attic and both were completely clear. The pipes, plumbing, and electrical had never made noises like that before or after, so we were completely baffled. The banging shook the window panes and could be heard throughout the whole house. It was not an earthquake either, because the floor was not shaking. It was just this terrifying, violent pounding that we could not explain. What made it stranger still was that all of this happened on the same day a family friend's son died. I do not know if it had anything to do with it, but the timing always stuck with me. That was not the only creepy thing that happened in the house. Over the 3 years we lived there were other moments that made the place feel weird. Sometimes when I was in the living room playing video games, I would feel a presence walk out of my mum's bedroom and move through the room behind me. My mum once had a dream that a brown smoke was trying to enter her abdomen. In the dream, she was paralyzed and could not scream, but I heard her struggling through the wall. We had a weird shared closet with a door between our rooms, and the noise was enough to wake me up and let me wake her. Another time I went down into the basement looking for something. I think I was checking on the kittens our cat had given birth to down there. While I was there, a strange black mist slowly covered my foot. That was enough for me to get the hell out immediately, and I never went back down there again. Honestly, screw sellers. I have always suspected that some of it had to do with the fact that my mum practiced witchcraft and had actually been in a coven for years. Whether that explains everything or not, I do not know, but I always felt it was connected somehow. The worst part is we never figured out what caused the banging. We checked the perimeter of the house and everything else we could think of, but there was nothing there, no mechanical explanation, no animal, no sign of anything physical that could have made the sound. My dad also died less than a year later while we were still living there. Sometimes I wonder if that day was some kind of bad omen or premonition, but I do not know. I also had 2 incredibly strange dreams about that house after we moved out. I grew up in a house that to this day I would describe as genuinely haunted. My first experience happened when I was about 5 years old, and is still one of the clearest memories I have from that age. So one night I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night and saw something standing at the end of my bed. It was neither detailed nor clear, more like a dark figure, but I could tell something was there. I immediately started screaming and my parents rushed into the room. They told me it was just a dream, tried to calm me down, and then left. After that, I couldn't sleep with my door closed anymore. I kept it open every single night because it made me feel slightly safer. From that point on, things did not stop. Almost every night, I would wake up at the same time and see a shadowy figure walk past my bedroom door and into my parents' room. It became such a constant thing that as a kid, it almost felt routine, even though it still frightened me. There are also things my mum has told me that I do not personally remember, because apparently my brother and I used to talk about the woman in white sitting on the stairs all the time. I have no memory of that at all, but she insists it was something we both mentioned more than once, which makes it even stranger to hear about now. My dad has his own experience from that house too, and his is very different from mine. At one point he was extremely sick, to the point where it was really concerning. He said that a woman dressed completely in white came up to him, put her hand on his forehead, and told him that everything was going to be okay. Unlike my experiences, his did not feel threatening. If anything, it seemed calm and reassuring. Later on, we moved into another house, the one my parents still live in now. And oddly enough, that place also had activity, but it felt completely different. If the first house was unsettling, this one felt almost neutral, maybe even slightly hopeful at times. In that house, it was common to hear or see someone walking around when no one was actually there. You might catch a glimpse of someone going into the laundry room, only to check and find it empty. It happened often enough that it just became one of those things you noticed and then moved on from. I never got a threatening feeling from it. If anything, it felt more like something just coexisting in the space, going about its own routine. I used to joke to myself that if there was a ghost in that house, it was probably just doing chores like everyone else. The last time I visited my parents, something happened that still makes me laugh a little when I think about it. I was looking around for a bottle of wine and couldn't find it anywhere. I checked the usual spots, looked through cabinets, and even asked if anyone had moved it, but no one had. At some point, I ended up checking a place I was sure I had already looked, and there it was right in front of me. It might sound small, but it genuinely felt like one of those moments where something just nudged me in the right direction. Compared to what I experienced as a kid, it felt harmless, almost like whatever was in that house is just there and not trying to scare anyone. I grew up in a house that I would honestly describe as haunted. My family moved there when I was still in single digits, and I lived there until I turned 18, and then moved out. We were told that an elderly woman had died in the house before we moved in, and over time, it honestly started to feel like she had never truly left. The way we experienced it was not aggressive or threatening, but it was definitely noticeable. It often felt like she was checking in on us. You would be going about your day, and suddenly something would happen that made you jump. One of the scariest moments I remember was being told very distinctly to turn off the light as I was leaving a room. It was not a vague sound or something easy to dismiss. In fact, it sounded like someone standing directly across from me, addressing me. And it caught me completely off guard. What is interesting is that we did not really start acknowledging it openly until we were teenagers. Before that, things would just happen, but we either brushed them off or did not fully process them. Once we got older though, it became more of a shared understanding in the house. We even joked that maybe it had something to do with all the energy and chaos that comes from being active teenagers. There was also what we ended up calling animals, which might sound strange, but it was the only way we could describe them. You would catch glimpses of something low to the ground, like a pet, moving through the room. Even my dad, who was the biggest skeptic I know, would react to them. There were many times he would physically step over something that was not visibly there, like he genuinely believed something was in his path. Eventually, we came up with our own explanations for that too. We told ourselves they were the spirit of pets. We had loved cats and dogs that had passed away and stuck around. It was a comforting way to make sense of things. Not everything felt as harmless though. The one thing that really unsettled me was hearing voices coming from another room in the middle of the night. It wasn't just a random noise, nor a creak of the house, but an actual conversation. I could hear the people talking quietly somewhere else. That genuinely concerned me. Aside from that, there were also small lights that would move or bounce around. They never did anything threatening, and seemed to just come and go without any pattern. We kind of just lumped those in with animals in our mind, just another strange, harmless presence in the home. At some point, we started calling anything unexplained cousin it, like the character from the Addams Family. If something weird happened, and no one could explain it, someone would just say, "It did it," and that was that. It became a running joke, which honestly helped ease the tension and made everything feel a lot less intense. Eventually, all of us moved out, and no one in my immediate family lives there anymore. Even now, I will sometimes think about the house and the presence we believed was there. I wonder if it was the elderly woman, or if there was someone else there too. And I wonder if the new people who live there have experienced anything strange as well. I lived in a house that was haunted. My room must have been the worst part of it because while my siblings and stepdad would hear or see things once in a while, I was dealing with something almost every night. It started off with constant footsteps and that feeling that someone was always watching me. Walking through my room, I'd suddenly hit patches of freezing cold air. At first, I told myself it was just house stuff, but it stopped feeling normal when whatever it was followed us to our next house. That's when it got bad enough that my mum finally started believing me, because one night she saw a hand reaching underneath a door right next to her, and that was the moment it became real for her too. Around 3 weeks after we moved into that house, my cat scratched my arm pretty deeply when I picked her up. After that, she vanished for a week. We searched for her everywhere. We were desperate. Eventually, we went back to our old house and that's where we found her. She had somehow gotten inside the completely shut, locked and boarded up house. It was an old farmhouse and we had been evicted, so it should have been empty. But she was upstairs in a closet with the door closed in on her. The strange part was that the closet door opened outwards, so it did not seem like she could have closed herself in there that easy. Luckily, she was still alive, but she was so close to starving to death. After that, things got worse. Every single night, I would wake up to the sound of heavy thuds, like someone was hammering their fist against the walls. It never happened at the exact same time, which somehow made it worse. It always hit 3 times to wake me up, and then, almost like it was mocking me, it would hit 1 more time after I was awake and then stop. And it happened night after night. Then, we found out that my mum's ex-husband had molested my brother. Not long after we learnt that, I was alone in my room one night and found myself wishing he were dead. The second I thought it, I heard a thump on the wall. And 1 week later, he had taken his own life. That was 7 years ago, and when we left the second house and moved far away, everything stopped all at once. My mum also broke up with the guy we were living with because he used to hit me a lot. And would you believe that not long after we had moved away, he took his life as well? Is it some kind of evil guardian spirit or just a coincidence? I can't say for sure. My baby is only a few months old, and we just moved into a new apartment that is almost perfect, except for one very large problem. My partner and I have been fighting for no real reason, which is strange because we almost never argued before. On top of that, we have both been seeing and feeling things that do not make sense, and the apartment, for lack of a better term, does not feel right. It all began with some small things. For example, doors would open by themselves, even when no one had touched them. We also kept noticing cold spots, and every time one showed up, the hair on my arm would stand on end. At first, we tried to explain it away, but the longer we stayed there, the stranger it became. My partner saw what looked like a little girl one time. She ran out of the room, but later the presence seemed different, like a long shadow figure. Now we think it might be the same thing, just showing itself more clearly. A can also fell by itself the other day while everyone was in the same room. It happened in the living room, even though we were elsewhere in the apartment, and nothing around it explained it. That same night, my partner said he saw something move. Then the night after that, as he was about to fall asleep, he saw something move in the light. At first, we tried to brush it off and say it could have been the cat, but it clearly was not. Not long after that, the door began opening on its own. The cat was coming out of the bathroom, and we were on the other side of the apartment. Nothing was touching the door. The fan was blowing in a way that should have pushed the door closed, not opened it. After that, he saw a shadow figure moving down the hallway. There were also times when he thought he heard his name being called, even when I was out food shopping. Other times he would feel like I was in the kitchen, when I was actually in the bedroom. It has made the whole place feel unsettling, especially as we have a baby. We do not want anything to happen to our child, so we have not been sleeping in the apartment while trying to figure out what's going on. We asked whatever it was to leave us alone, and at first it did seem to stop bothering us. But last night, we kept telling it to leave and it wouldn't. It rattled our front door like it was trying to scare us or tell us to get out. No one was outside, and no one was coming into the building. We also had a cross hanging on the bedroom door. and that door opened on its own too. At this point, we're not sure what to think. Has anyone dealt with anything like this after moving into a new place with a baby? I have lived in haunted houses for as long as I can remember. Sometimes I honestly wonder whether the places were haunted, or whether I was the one somehow drawing it in. When I was a kid, I used to hear my mum walking down the hall into the kitchen, rattling dishes and making a mess in there. I would always lie there wondering what she was doing up so late. So one night, I finally got up after hearing her moving around in the kitchen to ask for a glass of water. And I got the shock of a lifetime when I walked into a completely dark and empty room. What made it worse was the feeling that something was there, even though I could not see it. It was not just an empty kitchen. It felt occupied somehow. And the worst part was the sense that now it knew I was there. So I ran straight to my parents' room, dove in between them, and spent the night shaking like a leaf. My dad got up to check the doors and windows, and my mum eventually took me back to my room. After that, I never got up to go to the kitchen again at night. Another house we lived in when I was a little older was my favourite in terms of size and space. It had its own very strange energy. I would wake up in the middle of the night, convinced that the chirping outside was not actually crickets, but something pretending to be them. I would get pulled into the bedroom window, which looked out over a huge wooded back lot, and I would see little blue lights drifting around the trees. But they never came close. They just hovered out there, bobbing gently in the distance, like they were aware I was watching but didn't care. More than once I woke up later in my bed with no memory of getting back under the covers, and the last thing I remembered was having my face pressed against the window screen, staring out at those blue lights. Later on, we moved into the house where I spent the rest of my childhood before I got married and moved out in the late 90s. That house seemed to hold a memory of something. So many strange things happened there. It felt like the place had a personality of its own. Well, most nights, just after 9 p.m, I would hear chains dragging across the concrete driveway. We would hear footsteps stomping through the house, sometimes during the day and sometimes in the middle of the night. Pictures would clatter right off the wall. From time to time, a dark shadow would appear out front, leaning against the large oak tree in the yard. For a while, my bed would shake while I was lying in it. That one really unnerved my parents too. They eventually had someone come bless the house, and things did calm down for a little bit. But little by little, the activity started again. When I got married, my husband and I moved into his family's guest house while we saved money for our own place. That house was terrifying in a different way. On top of the strange things that happened there, both of us began having nightmares, and our relationship began to feel strained. His parents even said they could hear us arguing when we weren't home. They would hear crying when no one was there at all, and we would hear banging coming from the walls and ceiling. And when my husband banged back, the knocking would answer in the exact same pattern. It felt like something was listening and reacting. Every home I have lived in seems to have its own strange presence, and after enough years of that, I really do start to wonder whether I have just been unlucky, or whether some people are simply more sensitive to the paranormal than others. Something happened a few days ago, and it's been on my mind a lot. It's put me on edge, and I really can't make sense of what happened. If someone can help me make sense of this, please tell me. But let me give you a little background info first. I recently moved into this lovely house with my spouse, about 11 hours away from my original home. The home I lived in from birth until 2 months ago was a beautiful farmhouse in a quieter neighborhood, built in the later 1800s. There have been a few experiences there I typically chalked up to cats, old house noises, or simply my imagination. Needless to say, I'm used to the way a house like that can speak, like wind blowing through the attic, or creaking noises downstairs. Even multiple times I heard my own name being spoken by my ma or pa when I was very much home alone. But I always chalked this up to my childhood imagination, as it never happened once as I got older. But again, what I heard, I cannot explain. I moved to the house we live in 2 months ago. It's near a large church camp. When I say near, I mean you have to drive through the camp to get home. There's no other way. Back to the other day. I was home alone recently and stupidly quit my job. My spouse was at work and it was just me. At around 7 PM I was laying on the bed with the fans off, scrolling Reddit, all 4 cats and 1 dog, nice and quiet in the room with me. There was a bit of a mold problem when we bought the house, so they're staying with us in the bedroom until we can clean up the mold and cat-proof. That was when I heard a very loud noise coming from upstairs. It stunned me in my tracks and lasted maybe a minute. It sounded like it was coming from the kitchen upstairs, cabinets slamming, stomping, just all around moving about. Honestly, I was terrified. It was loud enough to which I thought someone had broken into the house, or perhaps Dad had popped over to work on the sliding glass door. I stood up from the bed, trying to be quiet, and when I was about to start recording, all noise stopped. I hesitantly went upstairs, recording still, checking the upstairs rooms, when I heard nothing more, and saw that nothing had been moved. I went back to my room, pretty freaked out. About 20-30 minutes later, when I had started to come down a bit, I heard noises like it again. Only this time it sounded like it was coming from the level of the house I was on, yet more distinct. This time, I thought it may have come from both the kitchen and utility room, which are on completely separate levels of the house, and I heard what sounded like chairs skirting about. This time I waited a minute or so, again tried to record the noises, but it was a bit more distant this time and nothing came from the recording. So I grabbed my rifle, grabbed the dog who hadn't reacted at all to any of it, and we scouted every single room in the house, every closet, the showers in the bathrooms, the hidden safe room, and I heard nothing, saw no one, and it didn't look like anything had moved. Now I'm about to start crying at this point. Every step I took, I paused to test if it was the sound of my pants rubbing together. Was it my pants or something else? Nothing happened until maybe an hour later, when I was still very much on edge. I sat at the entrance to my bedroom simply listening. Throughout the hour while I was cleaning, I thought I could hear something again, but not conclusive. Nothing like the first time in which I thought someone was in the house, helping themselves to the fridge upstairs. So I sat, and heard what sounded like something falling over in the utility room. It was a loud crash, echoing throughout the house, and nothing else happened. I went to check later, and nothing had fallen. And that's it. Nothing has happened until today, in which I heard more interesting noises, but again, nothing as loud or prominent as the first experience. To give you some more background info, the house we moved into has been off the market and uninhabited for 2 years. The original owners, before me divorced, had the house foreclosed, packed up and left, leaving many things behind, including personal belongings, trash, and an absolutely maggot-infested fridge. The house I moved out of had some interesting stories to tell when my brother was a toddler and before I was born, and as my parents were just beginning to move in, they caught him speaking to someone facing the corner of the room. When asked, he said he was saying goodbye to Michael. He did not know any Michaels, nor did he have any imaginary friends. Other things happened during the time when they were beginning to settle into the home. Mom would wake up at nights, having heard glass shatter somewhere in the house, though in the moment, she thought it was just a dream, until she heard it happen again once fully awake. When she went to investigate, there was no broken glass anywhere to be found. Other instances occurred again before I was born, in which my brother's toys would power up in the dead of night. It became quite annoying to Mum, to the point she took all the batteries out. It continued to happen, no batteries until she threw the toys out. Once they settled, life there was typically quiet, and I never felt as scared or spooked as I did the day I heard what I cannot explain in this house. There were other instances in the old house as well. Times in which, while we were packing up to move out, I heard on multiple occasions the door to our stairs slamming shut. My spouse would be downstairs, so I went to ask if they had slammed it, only to get a no, and that they never heard anything. Once we finally packed up and moved, the neighbour next door to us in the original house bought it. On the occasions they would visit the house, his wife nearly always called out to see if anyone was there. I think she suspected a squatter, when she had the feeling of not being alone. And whenever she entered, no one would ever be there. They paid a cleaning lady to come and wipe down the walls and such. The neighbour then called us to ask if there was any unusual history to the house that maybe they should know. He informed us that after the first appointment of the cleaning lady coming by, she came and told him that she was never going back there again, as the entire time she felt like someone had been watching her. No one had told them anything of Michael or our strange experiences. My brother-in-law and mother-in-law came to visit a week or so ago. One morning my brother-in-law asked if we had any cats out at night. He heard scratching at his door. Bear in mind the cats have been with us since we moved in, only to be let out on occasions under supervision. But that's pretty much all I have for now. I'm concerned with the scratching comment. Maybe there is an animal in the house, but with the old house, we were very much accustomed to the occasional and sometimes perpetual animal presence. Typically it's accompanied by chirping, squeaking or hissing, and not sounding like a whole human in my kitchen. I severely appreciate anyone who takes the time to hear this. I'm open to any interpretation or speculation. I'm a bit of a skeptic, though I do believe in the supernatural. Just that 90% of experiences of tapping on the walls, even disembodied voices, can probably be explained away. Finally, I would like to add that my Gramps recently passed away on May the 8th. I had known him all my life. He had watched me grow up. He was an amazing man, a great father and husband. His death didn't hit me too hard. I had known in my gut that he would pass soon, as his health was seriously declining for a month or so. I went to say goodbye when I got the chance a few weeks before he passed. The man I saw and spoke to was not the man I had known. My father even said he had seen the same look in his dad's eyes as he was dying of cancer. The look of life leaving. It's interesting. The day he died, I was born on May the 4th, my mum May the 6th, and he passed away on May the 8th, with Mother's Day being May the 10th. Maybe he was coming to check in on me and say goodbye properly before he left, helping himself to the fridge on his way out. When my spouse came home, all the noises stopped, though I called out from our bedroom and said, "Hey Gramps, if that's you, you're not allowed in our bedroom. Love ya." And that was that. Nothing of the same caliber or loudness since. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you have enjoyed tonight's collection of haunted house scary stories, and if of course you did, you can let me know down below in the comments section. I would like to extend an extra special thank you to my members and patrons whose names you can see on screen for their continued love and support of the channel. And if you would like to join their ranks and get some free exclusive content, head on over to my Patreon where you can find just that. Links down below. But that's it from me guys. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one. Good night.